Well, welcome as we begin a series of videos on the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, God's people are gone from the land, and yet they are not forgotten. God is still working out his purposes for them and through them. And it's also interesting that God himself is not mentioned in the book, but that doesn't mean he's not there. He's still working behind the scenes. God is gone but not forgotten, in that he is still working out his purposes at this time as well. Now, as we look at chapter 1, why don't you pause the video and have a read through chapter 1 yourself. I'm sure we've all known people who are very good at showing off. Well, that's what King Xerxes was like. He spends half a year showing off all of his possessions, his palace, his gardens, his gold, his silver, his precious stones. Everything that he owns is shown to everyone who will come and watch and amaze at all the amazing things he has at this drunken party, which is just incredible. But there's one last thing for him to show off, thing to him at least, is his wife, Queen Vashti. And so he summons for her, he sends for her to come to the party so that he can show her off to all of the men at the party. He's hardly treating her as he ought to. And yet she refuses to come. She stands up to him and says no, which is very interesting. And that's where things take a bit of a turn. Well, King Xerxes is not the kind of person you say no to, like most dictators, and so he summons all of his advisors, and they're most concerned that if the queen is able to say no to her husband, then why wouldn't all of the women, all of the wives in the land then start saying no to all of their husbands? Perhaps they're concerned about their own wives. And so they advise the king and suggest that he makes an example of her, which he follows. And so the law is set in place that the queen is never again allowed to enter into the presence of the king. And not only that, but she loses her royal status as queen, only for it then to be given to another. How are we to judge King Xerxes? Well, he wasn't very wise, he wasn't very godly in his behaviour, and he certainly wasn't very kind to his wife. He wasn't a great leader, and yet God's people were called to live under his leadership at this time. Now, we don't have many governments today that are like King Xerxes, and yet we can't always expect them to behave in godly and good ways. But we're still called as God's people to live under their rule in godly ways, even if the government of the time isn't. And yet God is still king. He's still the one on the throne. He's still the one who is sovereign, and he is good and he is wise. He's even using these events in Esther to work out his purposes, as the circumstances are creating just the right opportunity for the right person to rise up at the right time to save God's people. Doesn't that sound just a little bit like Jesus? Well, join us again next time for Esther chapter 2. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications so that you'll know when the next video is out. And if you want to, leave a comment below. See you next time.